In Africa, the desert is advancing, turning once fertile farmland into dust and forcing many to abandon their homes. But they're fighting back with their bare hands. In the western United States, the desert blooms thanks to large-scale irrigation, but the fields may not be farmland much longer. Is the technology that transformed the desert also poisoning the land? The desert doesn't bloom here anymore. Tonight on Nova.
Major funding for Nova is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide. Additional funding was provided by the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying healthcare products worldwide. And by Allied Signal, a technology leader in aerospace, electronics, automotive products, and engineered materials.
At first glance, these African hippos seem to be thriving in a tropical paradise. But their paradise will soon be lost. Even though they're currently protected by guards and laws in a game preserve, in the end, the guards and laws will be powerless to save them. The hippos live in a stream-fed lagoon in West Africa, but the lagoon is shrinking, and without it, the hippos won't be able to survive. For 20 years, the climate here has been getting drier, but climate is only part of the problem. Outside the park, the forest is being cut down by the local people. Now, unprotected by forest cover, the streams that feed the lagoon are drying up, and the desert advances, threatening not only the lagoon, but the entire area. This process, called desertification, is a growing problem in the world's arid regions. Millions of people live in these dry lands, and desertification directly threatens their survival. One crisis area is in Africa. Here, the Sahara Desert is moving south into the region called the Sahel. For thousands of years, nomads have herded their cattle across the Sahel, seeking out pasture wherever rain has fallen. Nomadic herding is an efficient way to take advantage of the area's sparse productivity, but it depends on keeping the population of cattle and people at a level the land can sustain. But now this delicate balance has been disturbed, and so the dunes advance, swallowing up villages and agricultural land, indifferent to human efforts to survive at the desert's edge. The damage is especially evident in Burkina Faso, formerly the French colony of Upper Volta, one of the poorest countries in the world. The desert is advancing here because too many cattle and goats have destroyed first the grass and then the trees. Unprotected by vegetation, the soil dries out. The fine organic material called humus blows away, and when the rain does fall, a crust forms. The next rain then flows across the Earth's surface instead of sinking into the soil. With their roots unable to draw moisture, the ancient baobab trees die. The cattle finally die, not of thirst, but of starvation. Here in Burkina Faso, drought has ruled since 1968. Long cycles of drought have been occurring in this part of Africa for centuries. The nomads recall a history of droughts when their precious cattle died, and worse droughts when people died. In the current drought, the Deula people have lost their cattle, all their wealth, to starvation and disease. They can usually grow a little grain. This year, that's all they have to live on. The village spokesman is Badari Abedina.
The season was not very good here. Some of us have only harvested enough to keep us alive for 3 months, some only enough for 2. Most of the men have had to go to the towns to try to find something for their families to eat.
As the desert advances, the nomads have been forced to move south, seeking pasture for their cattle far beyond their traditional territory. Even the farmers living further south must now migrate to areas where there is more rain, where they can clear forested land and plant more crops. It's these farmers who also threaten the hippos and their lagoon. So the hippos and the forest are victims of the displaced people who, by trying to escape the advancing desert, are bringing the desert with them. The desert does not advance on a broad front. It breaks out in a rash of clearings. These are new villages where farmers have settled and cut the forest for fields. 15 years ago, it was unbroken savanna. Now the land is deteriorating rapidly. The new settlers are the Mossi people. Compared to the region they've left, the land here seems good. The Mossi are well known for their resourcefulness, and at first they do get good crops. This year, a new granary has been built for the harvest of beans, a crop which is used to make a staple food of bean porridge. But within 10 years, the Mossi's new farmland will be useless. To grow the beans, the forest was cut down and burned. The ancient African soils have little fertility, and the ashes of the trees provide nutrients for the farmers' crops. But the nutrients are quickly used up, and future harvests will steadily decline. Here, the land has only recently been cleared, but already the crop of millet is very poor. In order to restore the field's fertility in this slash-and-burn agricultural system, the land must be left to lie fallow for 8 years after 3 years of growing crops. The fallow period allows new growth and the buildup of organic materials in the soil, so it can be farmed again. But now, with so many people in the area, the land is farmed every season, and there is little forest left to clear for growing food or for the fuel needed to cook it. Throughout the region, forests are being depleted faster than they can grow. Soon, the only way for the Mossi to maintain food production will be to move on and clear a new area, if they can find one. The local people are the Bobo. Life in this Bobo village of Bakoniso had been prosperous for hundreds of years. But now the Bobo are outnumbered 10 to 1 by the Mossi immigrants, who have all arrived in the last 15 years. There's not enough land or water to go around. Only 1 generation ago, forests surrounded this ancient village. Men had to carry spears for protection against lions. Now, with no forest left, the headmen are worried about the land's fertility. Their spokesman is Paul Michel Travle.
Before, the soil was better. Now it's too light. You must put fertilizer on it. Before, it was richer. Everything we planted would grow. It was rich because it held the moisture. Now, if we cultivate without fertilizer, it's not rich enough. There's the sun everywhere, and it's dry.
By African standards, Bakraniso is well off. The men can afford bicycles. Their prosperity comes from a cash crop, cotton. For 20 years it has been grown in the area, promoted by a French company that supplies modern seed and fertilizer. The money the Bobo receive for their work puts some cash into the local economy. Before, the Bobo grew their food in the traditional way, by alternating growing years with long fallow periods. But now, to get money from the cotton, they must use the same land continuously. The French fertilizer makes it possible for the Bobo to practice a system of crop rotation. After 1 year of growing cotton, the same land is planted with sorghum, a grain crop. This yields a good harvest because it uses the remains of the fertilizer. The third year, the land is planted with maize. In the next year, they grow cotton again so that the company will provide still more fertilizer and the cycle can repeat. The system will work as long as the trading company provides the fertilizer. If the shipments were to stop, the only way the Bobo villagers could replenish the soil would be to let the fields lie fallow. But the land outside the village is already being used to its limits, farmed by the Mossi settlers. So for food, the Bobo have become completely dependent on the French company's fertilizer, and therefore on the world market for cotton. Already the shortage of land is close to causing tribal conflict.
The Mossi have overwhelmed us, and we are fed up with them. We have run out of grain, and we no longer have any arable land. They behave as if they were superior to us, and that's not good. The elders don't like that. We, the children of this land, when we are looking for land to till, we don't find any. There is no more land to give to anyone. Even up in the hills now, there are fields everywhere. It would have been better if we could get one together. But the Mossi try to act superior. They no longer show any respect to the inhabitants of this village. This is the source of the conflict.
The Bobo worry that their land will become like the Mossi lands in the north, in the Yatenga region, where drought and deforestation have left little but stones and inedible shrubs. Only a few tree trunks dot the barren landscape. The Mossi villages have stood on the same sites for generations, but the land has turned against them. The villages are now half deserted. Most of the men have left to find work or grow food in the south or by the coast. Only women and children remain. Every day they grind a little more of the meager harvest. It's not surprising that the young people are leaving the villages. But at least for now, this village will not be abandoned. With their menfolk away, the women of Basi have decided not to submit to the drought and the desert. They are fighting it with their bare hands. The temperature here usually exceeds 100 degrees, and less than 20 inches of rain fall each year. Yet when the rains do come, they are fierce and wash away the soil, even on this apparently level land. From an Oxfam project, the women learned that they could improve their crops without fertilizer or machinery simply by building lines of stones, which help to keep the soil and the water in place. The technique is known as rainwater harvesting. A line of stones must be built along the level contour of the land. To find it, a plastic tube filled with water is strung between two poles. The tube is maneuvered until the water levels are equal at each end. Then the contour can be marked and the stones placed along it. It's difficult to believe that anything could grow on this crusted soil, but the method works. When the rain falls, it runs downhill until it meets a line of stones. This slows the flow of water, and both soil and vegetable matter collect. The water also sinks through the crust into the ground, and plants can begin to grow along the lines of stones. Here, a crop of millet has already been harvested just a year after the wall was built. But will the harvest improve enough to stop the mossy from migrating south?
We don't want to go away from here because we don't understand the way of life of the people in the south. From what we know, it's better here even if it is difficult. That's why we are struggling. But with God's help and the help of our leaders, we'll get something to put in our mouth.
Here, there is starvation and thirst. We have no food, we have no water. This is why we count on God, and we formed an association to do the work.
In other mossy villages, the wells are drying up, another symptom of desertification. But once again, the villagers are fighting back. They are enlarging a dam that traps the rainwater that runs off a small hill. Last year, the dam held water for 3 months, so now it is being made wider and higher to hold even more. This water sinks into the ground and helps raise the water table. The soil which collected on the upstream side of the dam is being carried in bowls to reinforce the lower side. It's an heroic effort on the part of the villagers. But seen in the context of the devastated landscape, it seems insignificant. Yet efforts like these can slow the desert's advance. Such simple techniques make full use of the little rain that falls, and rain is the only source of water in this arid land. This year there is more water in the wells. Already the villagers have made a difference. But they also know that there is more to be done.
Welcome to the foreigners. You have seen our work. The problem is that the soil is dry. If you treat the ground, it becomes soft and fertile. And whatever you do, the soil can be worked. Now we see there's grass growing everywhere. The soil has become soft, so we can have food. This is why we are working hard, and we ask you to help us to learn so that we can make more progress. I mean that you should help us so that we can get on faster. We must not stop. We must move ahead.
But recovery will depend on more than the labor of the villagers. Economics also plays a crucial role. In the markets, the price of grain can vary widely. When grain is plentiful, merchants buy it up at a low price. But when harvests fail, the price of grain rises steeply, and few people can buy enough grain to feed their families. Some can only afford bitter wild berries, and some have no money at all. There may be grain available, but the merchants who control the market hold it back to keep prices high. To counteract this problem, the government has started programs to help villages like Sofokel. Here, 90% of the cattle have died of hunger. This disaster means the villagers have lost all their capital and have had to borrow money to live. But they have had a harvest, the first for 3 years, and a new grain storehouse has been built by the government. The farmers need to sell their grain to pay off their debts. And now there is an alternative to the market. A local committee has been given a loan to establish a grain bank with the help of an advisor who lives in the village. Just after the harvest, a farmer will usually get a low price for his grain because everyone wants to sell. But this village bank pays a set price for the crop. Later in the year, the price in the market will rise steeply as food runs short. But at the grain bank, families will be able to buy back grain for only 10% more than their original selling price. In the market, they would have to pay 2 or 3 times as much. In 1984, it was only the grain bank that saved the village from being abandoned. Because of this system, the villagers can count on being able to buy and sell grain at prices more favorable than they encounter at the marketplace. The farmers have more money to pay their debts, and the village moves a little further away from poverty. In 1985, the summer rains, though no more than the year before, were well distributed. Suddenly, much of the Sahel was covered in a growth of grass that had not been seen for years. It had come too late for the cattle at Sofokel. The carcasses of the cows that died of hunger lie surrounded by the pasture they had so desperately needed. The town of Gorom Gorom is the center of trade for the region, and here a meeting of the heads of village councils has been called to discuss what can be done. The group represents several different nomadic tribes who are the area's main cattle herders. These men are well aware that the issue is not simply one of poor rainfall, but that too many cattle have contributed to destroying the land. They must now try to persuade their people to have smaller but higher quality herds. In theory, these would give them the same income but eat less pasture, and so put less stress on the land. Their president is Seydou Madien.
Now I think we need to go for quality and not quantity. And for this, I believe that there have to be guaranteed markets to absorb the production. If there is no guaranteed market, it's too risky to invest in a small improved herd, as the animals would be very expensive. But still, I believe that it is essential all the same and necessary to do this, because where quantity is concerned, things cannot go on as they were. We must concentrate on quality. We've got to build up herds in some areas because they've got absolutely nothing left. There again, I think that it is completely beyond the capacity of the herdsmen themselves. So it's a political question.
But the nomadic people are not well represented in the government and can expect little support. This is the main road to the capital, Ouagadougou. The area is so remote that the herdsmen must drive their cattle 200 miles to be sold. They need to know that they will get a good price for their animals before they will accept the idea of having smaller herds. But there is no guaranteed market at the end of the road. And that's not their only obstacle. Even the existing market is being destroyed by European cattle. The common market is shipping cut-price surplus beef to the ports of the Ivory Coast.
However you look at it, this has been our death blow. For example, when we send cattle to Ouaga for the Ivory Coast, they tell us that the price on delivery at the coast is between 900 and 1,000 francs. But we are told that the meat from Europe sells between 400 and 450, and it's better quality too. So the people of the Ivory Coast prefer to buy the meat which comes from Europe because it's better quality and cheaper. I think that's quite understandable for them. They are right. So it's the meat imported from Europe that has ruined the local markets as well as the coastal market.
In the local markets, the cattle are bought and sold among the nomads, merchants, and speculators from the cities. At the height of the drought, when the nomads were selling their cattle to buy food, the market was glutted. A cow in poor condition would sell for only $10. But now that times are better, the merchants are selling fat cattle to the speculators at $200 a head. For the merchants, business is good. But for the ordinary nomadic herdsmen, the higher prices are disastrous. With their cattle dead in the drought, they have no capital and can't afford to restock their herds at all. And development projects intended to help the herders have not met with much success. In 1965, a model ranch was set up at Marcoy. High-quality Azuak cattle were brought in with the aim of improving the bloodlines of the indigenous herds, but they were never adopted by the local herdsmen. The cattle station is now deserted. The U.S. government spent more than $1 million here over 5 years. It was handed over to the local government, but the files and wall charts stopped in the early 70s when the money ran out. The ranch was planned on a large scale, more appropriate to the American West than to the Sahel. The emphasis was on technological solutions to the region's problems. But the running costs were far too high for Burkina Faso to afford, and the project was abandoned. In the last decade, over $10 billion has been spent on aid throughout the Sahel, with little effect. The desert still advances, people are displaced, and the cycle of desertification continues, not just in Burkina Faso, but throughout the Sahel. The problems caused by trying to survive in the desert are not unique to Burkina Faso or to other developing nations. 2/3 of the countries of the world must grow food in arid lands, and even where money and technology are readily available, difficult issues arise. In the western United States, the desert blooms thanks to large-scale irrigation. But here, it's the very water projects designed to transform desert into farmland that may now bring a bitter harvest. This irrigated land is in trouble because of salt concentration, waterlogging, and the buildup of poisons in the land. The Colorado River is one of the most developed water resources in the world, and its development has helped make the U.S. self-sufficient in food. Many of the great canyons of Utah and Arizona have been made into huge reservoirs, so that food can be grown in the desert. There are now 9 major dams on the Colorado. The water they hold irrigates 2.5 million acres of farmland. The river got its name because its water is full of sediment. Colorado means red-colored in Spanish. But like all rivers, the Colorado also carries salt. As rain runs off the land into the river, it washes out salts. Normally, the river carries these into the sea. But now, most of the Colorado River is used for irrigation. And instead of flowing to the sea, the water and the salt end up on the land, as in the Welton-Mohawk Valley near Yuma, Arizona. Here in 1957, the federal government funded a new canal from the Colorado River. It increased the irrigated acreage by a factor of 10. In this area, temperatures can reach 120 degrees. Farming in this harsh environment requires staggering amounts of water, as much as 10 feet per acre each year, and all of this water contains salt. Ironically, the same irrigation that brings water to the land also brings its ruin. It happens like this. When water is used for irrigation, it always contains some salts. Some of the water evaporates from the surface, leaving behind a crust of salt. The rest sinks into the earth, adding to the groundwater, which slowly becomes more salty. As the plant takes up water, salt also concentrates around the roots, and the soil eventually becomes salty enough to damage the plant. To cure the salt buildup, the farmers can flood the land with a lot of water, which washes the salt out of the soil and into the groundwater. But this makes the salty groundwater rise. If it comes within reach of the roots, the plant will die. The solution is to install underground drains. These lower the groundwater level. The salt can then be flushed out of the soil continuously, and the crops will flourish. Usually, the drainage water is pumped out of the ground and into open drains. The Welton-Mohawk drain was built by the federal government to rescue irrigation in the valley. It did solve the salt problem for the local farmers, but the drainage water had to go somewhere. So it was poured back into the Colorado River here, just above the Mexican border. But the river then became too salty to be used for irrigation in Mexico. Not surprisingly, the Mexican government protested. A huge desalinization plant is now under construction at Yuma to reduce the river's salt content. It will cost over $200 million by the time it's completed in 1989, with running costs estimated at $20 million a year. Then fresh water will flow along this channel back to the Colorado. It would have been less expensive for the government to buy up the 60,000 acres of farmland in the Welton-Mohawk Valley and take it out of production. In fact, 10% was bought, and the lemon trees were cut down. But in order to keep the farmers in business, the government, in effect, continues to subsidize the cost of farming in the desert. The irrigation and drainage systems are supplied at a fraction of their real cost, but the government also encourages and subsidizes water conservation. The U.S. Soil Conservation Service helps to pay for projects that would reduce the amount of water used in farming, so that there will be less drainage water to treat. One method is to make the fields very flat by laser leveling. A field that is level is irrigated more evenly and so needs less water. The leveling is done by setting up a rotating laser in the middle of a field. 2 tractors pull scrapers over the ground. As the laser strikes a sensor, it automatically raises or lowers the scraper to make the field level. Water conservation measures in the valley will cost about $20 million to complete. The government pays 3/4 of the cost. One of the large family farms is run by Rocky Curtis.
Right now we're kind of spoiled with our water situation because our water's fairly cheap at $40 an acre, and we have our irrigation system. We just flood heavily and then cut it off. But in the future, 10 years from now, we can see where the situation could be, that we could be paying 10 times as much, 20 times as much, who knows. We got other cities taking a lot of our water and are going to be taking more of our water. And we're just kind of planning for the future here. And with the government paying for 75% of these projects, we really can't afford not to put them in.
Rocky Curtis, with government help, is also installing an efficient drip irrigation system into his lemon groves. Drip irrigation pipes water directly to the roots of the trees. It halves the amount of water used by other irrigation methods. But startup costs are high, and the system must be filtered so that grit does not block up the water outlets. Once the system is installed, the farm will use less water. But large-scale irrigation will still be an expensive way to grow food. Despite the government subsidies, and even though many farmers use cheap Mexican labor, it is still difficult for American lemons like these to compete on the world market. Low world prices have made it a bad time for American farmers. Many are not making back their costs.
It's getting really tough. You know, we're growing cotton out here, wheat and alfalfa and some of these crops, and we're starving to death. You know, we'll grow a crop and spend $300, $400 an acre on growing it and getting $200 to $300 back on our net returns. It's not making it. And then when the city's encroaching on us and you know, we're farming on $4,000 an acre ground, and next thing you know, we got a big department store wants to go up and they're willing to pay $20,000 an acre. We can't afford not to sell it to them.
And that's what's happening in Arizona. Urbanization is rapidly changing the landscape, especially in the central part of the state. Farmers and developers are competing for land, and both groups want access to the limited water supply. While most of the available water is still used for agriculture, many farmers are selling out. Housing developments are replacing lemon groves. As long as there are no more than 8 houses per acre, they use less water than the lemons did. Even so, Arizona's natural reservoirs of groundwater are being emptied far faster than they can be replenished. So a new water project is underway, tapping the Colorado River once again. In November 1985, the first leg of a huge new canal, known as the Central Arizona Project, was opened. It transports water hundreds of miles from the Colorado River to the farms and population centers in the middle of Arizona. Only partially completed, it has cost $1.5 billion. The canal's first stop is Phoenix, one of the fastest growing cities in the Southwest, with 1.5 million inhabitants. Each of them uses about 250 gallons of water a day. As urban sprawl takes more and more farmland out of production, the federal funds initially intended to make the desert bloom are subsidizing swimming pools and housing developments instead. Since the canal's arrival, Phoenix draws less of its municipal water from irreplaceable underground reservoirs. But the water provided by the new canal can only partially offset the region's water overdraft. Even so, the dwindling resource is still consumed as if it will last forever. Modern technology may promise to conquer the desert, but Phoenix got its name because the city arose from the ruins of an Indian settlement which had also depended on canals and irrigation. The walls of Pueblo Grande were built by the Hohokam Indians, who abandoned their village about 500 years ago. Beneath the flight path of Sky Harbor Airport lie the last remnants of the Hohokam canals, great feats of engineering for their day. It is now thought that the Indians were starved out because their irrigated fields slowly accumulated salt until their crops wouldn't grow. Few people visit the ruins, but the ghosts of the Hohokam might tell them that most irrigation systems sooner or later run into trouble. In areas irrigated by the Colorado, salinity and scarcity of water have become serious problems. And around the world, irrigation has proved to be a mixed blessing. Nearly 4 million acres of farmland are lost to salinization each year, and it is estimated that almost half the world's irrigated land has been degraded by salinization and waterlogging. In California, a new and potentially even more serious threat to agriculture has appeared in just the last few years. It too is a byproduct of irrigation. The Sacramento River provides most of the water to feed an incredibly complex system of canals to irrigate the huge Central Valley. The southern half, known as the San Joaquin Valley, was previously desert or swampland fed by seasonal rivers from the mountains. Although it's still bounded by desert, this huge valley of nearly 5 million acres is now one of the most important agricultural areas in the world. California produces about 25% of all our fruits and vegetables. The farmers pay only 1/10 of the real cost of the water. This irrigation canal was opened in 1972. It brings water not to family farms, but to giant agricultural businesses. They grow crops like cotton with this subsidized water, along with vegetables and fruits. Yet only 1/3 of the fields are adequately drained. Already, salinization and waterlogging are causing production to drop by 10% a year. The Sacramento River has a strong current, and so can carry irrigation drainage water down into San Francisco Bay. But the San Joaquin River comes from a much drier area and is too shallow and level to cope with the drainage of the huge area irrigated by the new canals. So a new drain called the San Luis Drain was planned to empty into San Francisco Bay. But before it could be completed, the government money ran out. Only 1/3 of the drain was built. It had already cost about $3 million. The San Luis Drain ended abruptly at an area of marshland called Kanestorm, which had been declared a wildlife refuge. In 1981, the first water arrived from irrigation drains. With nowhere else to go, the drain water was diverted into the Kanestorm marshes. In 1983, the Bureau of Reclamation asked for additional funding to complete the San Luis Drain to San Francisco Bay. But first, by law, an environmental impact study was undertaken to see if the drain water would cause any ecological damage to the bay. They began with the Kanestorm Marsh. The drain water had been flowing into the marshland for only 2 years, but already it was beginning to look very different. Millions of birds migrate through California along the Pacific Flyway. The marsh was a popular stopping place. Every year, 10,000 coots would winter here. In the spring, it was an important nesting area used by 200 species of birds. But the reserve manager reported that the eggs didn't seem to be hatching. Birds like the killdeer and the American avocet were becoming scarcer. U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife began a survey of nests of all the species that could be found. The results were alarming. 2/3 of the coots and grebes nests contained eggs with dead or deformed embryos in them. This is a black-necked stilt's nest. Over 20% of their nests contained the same hideous evidence. A black-necked stilt with deformed bill and wings and no legs. Another, again a deformed bill and a brain outside its skull. Chemical analysis showed that their tissues contained abnormally high levels of the element selenium. In 1984, all the grebes disappeared from the reserve. In 1985, none of the stilts or avocets born survived beyond 2 weeks. Enough selenium had been concentrated in the marshes for them to be classified as a toxic dump. Most of the fish and coots were dead. Now the rangers, whose job is to protect the wildlife, had a new task. Wearing masks to prevent them from breathing selenium dust, they set about scaring birds away from their sanctuary. In 1986, this program cost $500,000. But though confused, the birds still tried to nest. The selenium that pollutes the Kanestorm Wildlife Refuge comes from the San Luis Drain. This biological nightmare began when desert soils, which contain naturally occurring selenium, were irrigated for the first time. The hills of the Coast Range, which border the San Joaquin Valley, were formed from rocks that contain sea sediments, the source of selenium. The area gets very little rainfall. So as the hills eroded over thousands of years, the soluble selenium in their rocks was washed down only as far as the floor of the valley and not down the river. But when the valley was irrigated, the selenium which had concentrated in the soil started to wash out into the San Luis Drain and into the Kanestorm Marsh. As a consequence of this irrigation, a designated wildlife refuge has been polluted with selenium in violation of a migratory bird treaty. A private lawsuit won by a neighboring farmer forced the Department of the Interior to take measures to halt the flow of contaminated rainwater into the marsh. There was only one sure way to do this: stop irrigation. But the farmers continued to irrigate. So in March 1986, the government began to dig up the field drains. A section of each horizontal pipe was removed and the ends blocked off. Without these drains, the water table will, in a few years, rise and waterlog the plants. So agriculture in the area will pay a price for the selenium pollution. Over 1 million acres will go out of production in the San Joaquin Valley if it is not drained by 1990. And there is now no chance that the San Luis drain will be completed. It is likely that much of this irrigated land will become desert again. Its status as farmland was only temporary. For the Kanestorm Wildlife Reserve, there is no future. The current proposal is to bulldoze the marsh into a small containment area and seal it off forever. In December 1985, the U.S. government confirmed that 9 other areas had dangerous levels of selenium. All of them receive irrigation drainage water. An intensive scientific investigation is now underway to determine the seriousness of the problem. Ironically, selenium is an element which plants and animals need in trace quantities for healthy growth, but too much is toxic, and very little is known about the way selenium is taken up. The scientists take core samples to map where selenium occurs in soil because the rocks which contain it are widespread. Until the studies are complete, there will be no way of knowing to what extent irrigation is poisoning the land. Turning large areas of desert into farmland once seemed the perfect solution to the world's ever-increasing demand for food. But the complex technology required for this transformation has brought with it a series of equally complex problems. Serious issues remain, both in terms of cost and of the impact on the environment. Water development is the special subject of environmental writer Bill Carl.
We have, after all, created an immense public investment in the creation of an agricultural industry in an area where God clearly never intended crops to be grown or large numbers of people to live. These are areas that in their natural condition are arid wastelands or malarial bogs. The profitability of those agricultural operations depend absolutely upon heavily subsidized water deliveries. That's what makes water issues kind of the ultimate politics in the Western United States, is that they are community decisions about the kind of society we want to be in the future. Until now, we've always made the decision that the maintenance of a large agricultural system is a luxury that we can afford and is a social good that we wish to preserve. The problem is that we're facing the natural limitations of the environment that we've chosen to place that agricultural community in, and the costs of maintenance continually get higher and higher.
For the time being, the desert sands will continue to be transformed into fields and cities. The Central Arizona project is pressing towards completion, extending the Colorado River even further into the desert. But it may be one of the last of the nation's huge water projects. Large-scale irrigation, once unquestioned as an inspiring and efficient way to grow food in the desert, is coming under increasing scrutiny. It may prove to be only a temporary triumph over nature. Desert agriculture everywhere requires endless ingenuity and constant effort. By their actions, people can resist the desert and even make the desert bloom. But should the people or the technology falter in the struggle, the desert will prevail.
For a transcript of this program, send $4 to Nova, Box 322, Boston, Massachusetts, 02134. Please be sure to include the show title. To purchase film or video copies of this program for educational use, call toll-free 1-800-621-2131. In Illinois or Alaska, call Collect, 312-940-1260. Major funding for NOVA is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide. Additional funding was provided by Allied Signal, a technology leader in aerospace, electronics, automotive products, and engineered materials. And by the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying healthcare products worldwide.